So let's talk about the New World Order. If you're here as a visitor, what we do usually is we divide this study in half. The first part is in the news, which we have been putting on the internet, on YouTube. And I think, Ryan, how many would you say today about the last one you loaded up?
53 hits in 23 seconds.
As soon as it got up, 53 hits in 23 seconds. So we know that there's thousands of people watching in the news. For all those that are out there, we're going to continue to try to do in the news and bring it out there because there's a hunger for it. So let me give you a little bit that's happening in the news and around our world. This is a visa study. Consumers want biometric authentication, not passwords. Remember I told you not too long ago that your passwords are pretty hard to remember. Sometimes we have multiple ones, and there's got to be some simplicity down the line. Well, it's happening. A recent study has found that consumers are aware of and are favorably disposed to authentication methods that don't include traditional passwords. Sponsored by Visa and conducted by AYTM Market Research, the survey of 1,000 U.S. consumers revealed that biometric authentication methods top the list of preferred password alternatives. So how does that fit into in the news? Well, we're watching our technology advance quickly, and we've been saying that for years now, especially in the last couple of months. But as it advances, we know that it's going towards what John had told us about in Revelation. There's going to be some type of numbering system that's going to take in everyone on the planet. And of course, the Antichrist is going to use that. The Bible talks about not being able to buy or sell. So the more we go to biometric identification, facial recognition, palm prints they're actually doing, not just fingerprints, but palm prints, embedding of chips. We are watching these things kind of progress independently, but sooner or later, and I'm going to give you a little prophetic insight, sooner or later, those technologies are going to meld together, and we're going to get one type of system that's going to come out. Listen to this one. Authentication methods such as fingerprints, facial, and voice recognition are easier to use than on a smaller screen space of a mobile device, while the devices themselves now have enough computing power to enable the use of such technology. So everything's advancing in it. Mark Nelson, Senior Vice President of Risk and Authentication Products at Visa, told HelpNet Security, advances in mobile device features are increasing the accuracy and the speed of biometrics, such that they can be used for financial transactions, and that's where we're going. I've been talking to a lot of people about Bitcoin. We've been telling you about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just to tell you a little bit about it, Bitcoin is a ledger that's online. You eliminate the middleman, you eliminate the banks, and you purchase it, and you can sell it right online. No one knows about it. You have your own identity to get into Bitcoin, and it's soaring. Today it went down about $2,000, but it was up to almost $19,000 for one. Now think about this. In November, if you had bought some, highly speculative, in November if you had bought some of Bitcoin, in November it would cost you $2,000 for one. So for $2,000 it's jumped to $20,000. So you could have made, if you did $20,000, you could have made $300,000 so far, just in 1 month. So it's astronomical, and what it is it's another biometric design, and I'm going to give you my personal take on it. I think that sooner or later some cryptocurrency is going to be used by the Antichrist because you can't buy or sell unless you have a certain number to do that, and it's not traced by anyone. So we're watching things that we may not understand happen, but they're all seeming to dovetail in a sense. And obviously it's not an Antichrist system now, don't get me wrong, but it is a way for people to make a whole lot of money without going to banks. How many of you don't like banks? Well, there's a lot of people out there that don't like banks. You're eliminating the middleman. For example, if you wanted to send $50 to me and I was overseas and you went to a bank, they may charge you, or $100, they may charge you $50 to send it, and I may have to wait a week to get it. If you wanted to send me a Bitcoin, you could send it instantaneously and I would get it with no fees. And so that's why it's attracting a whole lot of people, plus the fact that there's a lot of people that are laundering money through it. Not most of the people are investing, but you can't trace it. So a lot of places are laundering money through it. So it's a phenomenon that's happening, and the reason I'm telling you it is not to get you to invest in it or understand it. It's to let you know that these are the types of biometrics that are going on, and these are the types of technology that are going on that are going to dovetail one day. And I'm telling you, our society, it's not going to be tomorrow, but our society is going to be hooked into it because number one, they'll be saving fees. Number two, it'll be convenient. And number three, eventually, whatever that currency is that's in the world currency, you won't be able to buy or sell without it. All right, so there's about a host of questions, a plethora of questions that will come with Bitcoin. We'll do that some other time. But let me give you this one. This is from the New World Order also. 1.77 kids aren't enough. 1.77 kids aren't enough, the consequence of a shrinking population. America is shrinking, and this article says, I don't mean we're getting shorter, I mean that we aren't having enough babies, and here's why that's bad news for a society. An old Far Side, I remember Far Side cartoons. An old Far Side cartoon by Gary Larson portrayed an average American couple welcoming visitors to their home. In the corner of the living room sits a little boy watching TV, and next to him is half of another little boy. The title says, "Come on in," explained the couple. "Have you met Russell and Bill, our 1.5 children?" Larson's attempt to make fun of the American average, unfortunately, wasn't that far off fact. America's fertility rate has been hitting a historic low. Lyman Stone, an economist of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, writes at Medium about what he calls the Great Baby Bust of 2017. The latest official estimate, taken for 2-year-old data, puts the United States fertility rate at 1.84. In other words, the average American woman will have just under 2 children in her lifetime. But he says that's not including 2016 and 2017. He puts that at 1.77 births on average. And why was that happening? Why is it going down? Well, the birth rate is plummeting, and basically what it's doing is it's not keeping up with the death rate. So what we're doing is we're actually decreasing our population in America. Millennials are the ones who right now are in their prime childbearing years, are the ones mainly driving this downward trend. Not only are they getting married at lower rates than their parents did, but they're having fewer children on total. Many struggle to find stable work, are too focused on their careers, and find themselves saddled with college debt. Others just don't like kids, or vastly overestimate the cost of raising them, or just think the world is overpopulated. A myth, by the way, that's now thoroughly debunked, by the way. Others, whatever the reason, young adults are choosing to keep their nests mostly empty. And that's bad news for our economy, for our culture, and for our future as a nation. As a Weekly Standard in a book says, What to Expect When No One's Expecting, countries where citizens aren't having enough babies can look forward to long-term economic stagnation and social deterioration. There's no economy that has managed to knock out gangbuster growth with a declining population ever. Every time a country has declining population, they have an economy that tanks also. As governments raise taxes on dwindling worker-age population to cover the growing burdens of supporting the elderly, young couples may conclude that they are even less able to afford children. This creates a vicious cycle of childlessness, overwork, and despair, as seen in graying, shrinking countries like Japan or in Europe, where some governments actually pay couples to get pregnant. Also, children, because they are tomorrow's labor force and consumers, are the economic engines of the future. And on an individual level, the regret of having fewer children is verifiable. A whopping 40% of mothers nearing the end of their childbearing years say they have fewer kids than they would like to have had. But that's not all the declining things that are going on. A declining population also hurts us in ways that are harder to qualify in dollars and cents. Babies, in a unique way, tend to make adults care about the future that's beyond their own lifetimes. They're often the reason people save, people invest, and make sacrifices, and most importantly, defer gratification. When children become scarce, people are less apt to do these things, and therefore they stop thinking about a future that's beyond themselves. It's a selfish world when you don't think about children. And basically, children are an engine that keeps an economy and a nation going, and we are declining tremendously. Another one on the New World Order. Former insider, here's how the globalists think. What's a globalist? Well, a globalist is someone who wants to put everything together. Everything is one kind of country, one kind of economic system, one kind of economic currency, one kind of social government. And we know that John talked about that in the last days. Well, we have globalists now. 20 years ago, you never really heard the word globalist. Now you're hearing it. Ted Malloch has served on the executive board of the World Economic Forum. He's held an ambassador-level post in the United Nations. He's worked in international capital markets on Wall Street and held a senior position in the United States State Department. So he understands globalism because he used to live and work among globalists. And during a recent appearance on the Alex Jones show, he shed some light on how globalists operate. I'm quoting, "To some degree, I would say if you want to understand globalism, you need to get at the spiritual bearings, the spiritual underlying currents in globalism, which is not only relativistic, but it's a divorce, a great divorce from religion and from any notion that there is a God who exists or that you can know him personally." That's a really interesting take on this. He says, noting the low percentage of Western Europeans who follow any religious tradition anymore, Europe doesn't follow religious traditions, he added they would like to move the rest of the world away from their traditional bearings from their traditional cultures, from their traditional scriptures. The goal is to replace those traditions with whatever the globalists want people to believe. Who will be in charge then? Unelected bureaucrats who we call experts, really aren't that expert, who pull over on the rest of the population what they want to do, he said. And there's no democracy left in the end. There's no faith left in the end. There's just one gray monolithic state. So what is he saying? Well, I'm seeing it a little bit when I look at some of the trends. We know that when you have people coming into your country, immigrants, that's a good thing to a certain point. If you have immigrants that are flooding into your country, such as in Europe, you ruin the demographics of that nation. England no longer has a majority of English people that are there, native born. And so you have a lot of these countries that are facing the same thing. Well, what happens when that happens? Well, it's like adding water to coffee. The more water you add to that original mix, then what's going to happen is it's going to get weaker and weaker. And what's getting weaker? Well, what's getting weaker with massive immigration inflow is religious priorities. Religions are going out the window, and any traditions. So that makes the world more watered down and more globalistic. How many of you understand that? And so it's a scheme from Satan on a lot of different levels. And the globalists are allowing it because they're the ones that are going to get the riches based on that. So we're watching a couple things happen that really, when you put them together, it makes a lot of sense. Now, it's not like we are against immigration. Immigration started in America, we know that. But after a while, you have to limit your immigration. Every country does it, except in the last couple of years, because what you do is you actually have economic problems, and you have faith problems and cultural problems. And that's exactly what he's talking about. Let me give you another thing that's happening and talk about Israel. Jesus tells us about the fig tree blossoming. Look at this picture, and you will not believe what the article is talking about. That is a young Palestinian girl attacking some IDF soldiers, some Israeli soldiers. This is what the article states on its headlines. No way to treat a child. A cynical campaign to manipulate Palestinian children. Now, when I first read that, I would think that the article is going to tell me that the Palestinians are manipulating their children. Just listen to this. It's actually harrowing. In a video that has just gone viral, a young Palestinian approaches two Israeli soldiers. She hits, prods, slaps, and bites them. She's trying to provoke a reaction that will be caught on camera and show the ugly violence of the Israeli army. The soldiers respond with professionalism and restraint, and they ignore her attack. The Palestinian in question is Ahed Tamimi, best known from a 2016 video showing her biting and hitting a soldier, as well as from regular demonstrations in Nabu Salah. News reports have variously identified her as 16 or 17 years old. No Way to Treat a Child, or NWTTAC, is a campaign coordinated by Palestinian, an international NGO, many of which also promote the BDS movement, boycotting Israel. Those concerted efforts try to accuse the IDF of violating the rights of Palestinian minors. So they're taking this and they're saying that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, are violating their rights. Now, they never attacked her, they never did anything to her, but this is the campaign. It's almost unbelievable when you think about it. They seek international sanctions against the Jewish state. How do you look at that picture and go against the Jewish state and say they did something wrong? The whole world is jumping on this. This is when it's gone viral, and so is the UN. The leading group behind the campaign is that NGO, is what it's called. The agency, repeatedly tied to the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine terrorist group, has joined with US-based pro-BDS organizations, boycotters of Israel, such as the American Friends Service Committee and Voice for Peace, to lobby the United States government to use all available means to pressure Israeli authorities to end the detention and abuse of Palestinian children. I don't get it. I don't understand how everybody jumps on and says from this video that Palestinian children are being abused. There's never been anything happening to this lady, this girl. There was never any reprisal. Not one single Israeli soldier did anything to her. The video of Ahed Tamimi attacking a soldier, as well as the disingenuous social media campaign on her behalf, crystallizes the cynical calculus that lies at the heart of No Way to Treat a Child. Namely, Palestinian minors are encouraged to endanger themselves in hopes of provoking a violent response that will help demonize Israel. Here's one more sad example. For those orchestrating these effects and the NGOs that are trying to advance a political agenda, a detained or injured Palestinian teenager is far more valuable than ensuring their safety and well-being. So they're saying that they're promoting these teenagers to go attack Israeli soldiers any way they can, without weapons, but any way they can. Once they get out of teenagers, then they're going to attack them with weapons. And what they're doing is they're trying to provoke these Israeli soldiers to do something. And of course they're not. And so they're still going on with the campaign, I guess obviously thinking that the Israelis were going to do something, and they haven't. And so the ludicrous statements that they're making is pretty kind of obvious to us. I'm just not sure why the world doesn't get it. Let me give you a little bit more about Israel. What Trump has done in Jerusalem and declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is a firestorm. There's things happening all over the place. The U.S. vetoes a UN call for withdrawal of Trump Jerusalem decision. You got to listen to this. The United States was further isolated on Monday over President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital when it blocked a United Nations Security Council call for the declaration to be withdrawn. So the United Nations is calling President Trump to withdraw his declaration. The remaining 14 council members voted in favor of the Egyptian-drafted resolution, which did not specifically mention the United States or Trump, which expressed, quote, deep regret at recent decisions concerning the status of Jerusalem. So, in the Security Council, you need a unanimous vote. We are one of the votes. This is the first time in 6 years that we have vetoed something coming to the Security Council. First time in 6 years. So, I mean, the fact that the veto is being done in defense of American sovereignty and in defense of America's role in the Middle East peace process is not a source of embarrassment for us, Haley said. It should be an embarrassment, Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the UN for us, to the remainder of the Security Council. The UN draft resolution affirmed that any decisions and actions which purport to have altered the character, status, or demographic composition of the holy city of Jerusalem have no legal effect. I told you about this before. It's called the status quo. They want to keep the status quo. The status quo has always been nobody understands what's going on in Jerusalem. So they want you to keep that. They don't want to change anything by talking about Jerusalem being the capital of Israel. And it's a huge firestorm. So much that the Pope is now getting involved in it. And by the way, last time I talked about the Pope and in the news, I got some hate mail. Let me tell you something. The Pope is an individual, just like you are, just like I am. He does not have infallibility. Although people say he does not. And I can show you historically how the Pope does not have infallibility. Matter of fact, if he has infallibility, that means not able to make any wrong statement when he gets on the papal throne. I mean, he's the vicar of Christ, they say, and that every time he talks, it's like God speaking truth. He can't make an error. Well, the truth is that there have been 3 popes several different times in our history. When Napoleon was around, he captured one of the popes because he knew that that pope would be able to influence people. Well, what Vatican did is they elected another pope. So let me ask you a question. Who was the one that was infallible? Well, some of the priests split from it because they didn't think it was right, and they elected their own pope. Now you have 3 of them. Now which one do you believe that is the vicar of Christ? So the pope is not infallible. But people are treating him that way because that's what they claim in Catholic doctrine. So what we have is he's getting into the political realm. Anytime you see a major Christian leader, I don't care if it's the Pope or somebody high up in Protestantism, whenever you see them starting to try to slur people or try to win people politically and use their influence, you got to be very cautious. Listen, Pope Francis met with Jordan King's Abdullah II at the Vatican 2 weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, provoking outrage in the Middle East. According to the Vatican, the cordial conversations focused above all on the theme of the promotion of peace and stability in the Mideast, with particular reference to the question of Jerusalem and the role of the Hashemite sovereignty of King of Jordan as custodian of the holy places. He actually has some type of title to be custodian of the Temple Mount. They call it the Kotel. So this is how it happened. Now the popes, for years and years, thousands of years, have not even recognized Israel. Just recently have they actually recognized Israel and actually visited it. In 2000 was the first time a pope ever visited Israel, believe it or not. And so they haven't recognized that Jewish nation because of their stance on their stance against Christ, from what they say. So now they're recognizing the Jewish nation because they visited it, but now they're getting involved with the politics that are there. So listen to what happens. Now, let me just tell you, I grew up Roman Catholic, and some of you may have also. And as a Roman Catholic, I couldn't even play with Protestants. Now I are one. But I couldn't play with Protestants. I couldn't go to a Protestant church. I couldn't do that. It was a sin for me to do that. I went to Catholic school for 9 years, and it was a sin for me to associate with them. They were departed brothers, and I can show you the Constitution of the Vatican that talks about Protestants as being departed brothers. So just listen to this. So they didn't recognize pretty much Protestantism. Islam, they would never recognize. Judaism, they weren't recognizing it's having any relationship with. So listen to what happens. So we have the King Abdullah II, a Muslim, Islam, and he goes to visit the Pope. First of all, that would never happen before. So he says, he greets him on December 19th in the Apostolic Palace. He greets the Pope saying this, quote, "My dear friend and brother." Now, any Pope prior to that would have immediately ended the conversation. But what happened is Francis spent the next hour speaking alone with Abdullah and Prince Gehazi, an advisor to the king on religious cultural affairs. The Pope and Abdullah, and the Vatican statement said, renewed their commitment to encourage negotiations as well as promoting inter-religious dialogue. That means that he wants to float back and forth from Catholicism and Islam. And it says President Trump announced his decision on December 6th to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, and they also talked about that decision. So I'm really concerned what the Pope is doing. I'm really concerned with what he's doing on an international level. Another one on Israel. After Trump's Jerusalem declaration, the Palestinians now want UN membership as a state. The Palestinians are pledging to push the United Nations until it accepts them as a full member state in reaction to President Trump's declaration 2 weeks ago, saying that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We will go once again and many times to get full membership, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas was quoted as saying on Monday evening. We are a state and an authority, and we have borders and we have the right to get the world's recognition of us. Abbas also said the Palestinians would join 22 international organizations that would help to strengthen the legal status of the state of Palestine globally. He said every week they would join more international organizations. Okay, let me refute that a little bit because the UN's not going to do it. Palestine is not a state. They are not a state. Their borders aren't their borders. They are living in Israel, in occupied territory. They do not have a state. They have never had a state. And basically what they're saying is because we're in this bordered area that Israel allowed them to have with self-rule, they're saying now we're a state. They are not a state. And even if they were a state, they have terrorist organizations leading them. So the UN would actually be saying we're taking in a terrorist organization, which they usually give reprimands against. We're taking this terrorist organization and we're recognizing that they come together and they're a political body, and when we give them a vote of a terrorist organization inside the UN. I'm telling you, things are really kind of strange when you see some of the things that are happening in the UN. So Israel, Netanyahu responds. How many of you like Benjamin Netanyahu? I love the way he responds. Listen to this. Netanyahu says Palestinians must face the reality over Jerusalem. Palestinians must get a grip with the reality of Jerusalem. It is Israel's capital in order to move forward to peace. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says. Mr. Netanyahu spoke as protests continued in a Muslim and Arab world at the U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement that the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as the capital. The Prime Minister said that Jerusalem has been the capital of Israel for 3,000 years. And has never been the capital of any other people, and it never has. And he said, speaking in Paris after the talks with French President Emmanuel Macron, Mr. Netanyahu said efforts to deny the millennial connection of the Jewish people to Jerusalem are absolutely absurd. He says you can read it in a very, very fine book. It's called the Bible. He said you can read it in the Bible many times. You can hear it in the history of Jewish communities throughout our diaspora. Where else is the capital of Israel? It's in Jerusalem. Everyone knows it. Pretty amazing that he says it. Let me give you a little bit more that's going on about wars. And of course, this one is still ramping up. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I'm surprised that nothing has happened yet. But Bolton says this: U.S. might have to attack North Korea. The time may come soon when the U.S. will have no other option but to attack North Korea militarily. Former United States Ambassador to the United Nations John Bolton said Saturday night. Negotiations have not stopped North Korea's development of nuclear weapons, and China has not done what it could do to deter the North from proceeding with work that would allow it to hit U.S. cities with a nuclear weapon. I showed you their nuclear capability and how it's expanding, how they can actually hit every city in the United States right now. Nobody wants to use military force against North Korea because of the risks to South Korea. Nobody wants to see it happen, Bolton told the crowd at the Crown Plaza Resort in Asheville. But he said the risks to the United States of North Korea having nuclear weapons are soon outweighing that concern. Let me give you a little bit more as we go on about religion. How many of you know this new Star Wars came out? How many know it? What does that have to do with religion? This. You ready? Do you know what that is? Spiritual vacuum. Thousands are converting to Jediism. This is an absolute article. I kid you not. Yes, there are actual people out there that want to be a Jedi so badly that they've made Jediism their official religion. As we're going to see, a new documentary entitled American Jedi has just been released that examines this phenomenon. So I'm thinking of this, I'm reading it, and I'm not too far down the line reading it, and I'm thinking, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to use that in the news, until I saw a couple numbers. And I thought, that isn't ridiculous. That is blasphemous. Listen to it. There is actually an official website for the Temple of the Jedi Order that bills itself as the International Church of Jediism. And even though this faith is entirely based on a fictitious character, are you ready for this? The IRS actually granted tax exemption status to the Temple of the Jedi in 2016. So they audit me, and they wonder whether or not, this is going over in the news, they wonder whether or not I'm legitimate. Here I am preaching and teaching with all my heart in my life, and they wonder whether I should be tax exempt. They had to look at all the documents and everything that were there. They want to make sure I had tax exempt status, which I do, and it was confirmed. But they're giving tax exempt status to Jedi Knights that don't exist. Excuse me, I got to knock on a little bit here. Jedi Knights, that's fictitious, gets tax exemption, just like I have a 501c3, they have a 501c3? Okay, the IRS. Watch. Unfortunately, there are some people out there that are so drawn to the Jedi Order, they actually want to make it a religious faith. The following comes from the Huffington Post. For small sects of fan base, however, the line between the two worlds has blurred, and their love for Star Wars has manifested itself into a religious devotion, literally. Now, I'm not reading all of this, I'm just giving you some highlights. So let me go down a little bit further. It's one thing to dress up like a Luke Skywalker, which is kind of interesting all by itself, and wave a fake lightsaber around, but it's another thing entirely to make Jediism your religion. I guess it just shows how spiritually empty a lot of people are feeling these days. The core of the Jedi religion is a creed known as the Jedi Code. They have their own constitution and code. The Jedi Code. You ready for it? I'm not trying to convert anybody to Jedi faith tonight. Just I want to give a disclaimer right off the bat. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. Put back that labor sword. There is no chaos. There is harmony. And there is no death, there is the Force. This code doesn't even make sense, and yet there are thousands upon thousands of people all over the world that have chosen to make this the foundation of their lives. The Jedi census phenomenon is a grassroots movement that was initiated in 2001 for residents of a number of English-speaking countries, urging them to record their religion as Jedi or Jedi Knight after the quasi-religious order of Jedi Knights in the fictional Star Wars on the national census. So how many people actually do this? 10? 15? You ready? According to the New York Post, Jediism is the 7th largest religion in the United Kingdom, and it has 65,000 adherents in Australia. So I can become a Jedi preacher. The U.S. Census doesn't count Jedi as a religion. Thank God, only the IRS. But other countries' data give us a sense of the size. In England, again, 7th largest religion. And this one says in England, now Australia has 65,000 adherents. England, 175,000. 15,000 Jedis can be found in the Czech Republic. They don't even speak English. Listen, along with 9,000 in Canada, and again, 65,000 in Australia. So the article concludes this way. We live at a time when people are groping for answers, isn't that true, to the most fundamental questions in life. Millions of Americans are feeling deeply disillusioned, and they don't know where to turn. The spiritual void in our society is growing with each passing day, and the need for a spiritual awakening has never been greater. Let me throw my own little opinion in here. You have to have a source of truth. Everyone has to have a source of truth. When I talk to someone from another religion, I ask them, what's your source of truth? Well, somebody may say, well, it's what Muhammad said. So I have to figure out, was Muhammad, did he actually say things that were legitimately brought up, and did he go against any of those things? And I don't even want to go into that. You can look at Islam Exposed for that. Or you have to look at another religion. What was your founder? What was the founder of Mormonism? What was he about? You have to look at the founder, and then you have to find out the book that they say is their authoritative rule of faith and conduct. My Bible, which has lasted well over 3,000 years, 4,000 years almost, my Bible has not been disproven. As a matter of fact, When we found the Dead Sea Scrolls, it predated Isaiah by 1,000 years, and we had every single word in our translation of Isaiah that they had for that predating of 1,000 years. So instead of contradicting itself, it has proven itself. It's the most read book in the world. It has the largest sales of anyone. And listen, it's been around a long time. People have taken shots at it for an awful long time, and no one is can disprove it. Now they can come up with their little things they think are wrong, but if you really understand the Bible, you'll understand that the Bible proves itself. And so here's the deal. You have thousands of people out there that are basing their religion on a fictitious Jedi organization. You know what? There's a lot of false religions out there that do the exact same thing. Aren't you glad that you're in a church that preaches Jesus Christ? Amen. The only way, by the way. The only way. Amen. All right, let me give you a little bit more on religion. So just to let you know that it's going to get a little weirder. Humans will happily worship a robot messiah, new experts claim. Well, if you worship a Jedi, it's not that far of a jump. A religion based around a robot god will succeed because humans tend to worship supreme understanding, knowledge, experts have claimed. One researcher has said that the same drive that compels people to believe in higher beings and follow religions will also work for the so-called AI godheads. And that's not far from what John said either. There's going to be an image of the beast that's going to be given life. That's AI, by the way. That's artificial intelligence. Others have commented like religion, people will eventually rely on a robot messiah to solve society's problem. Last month, former Uber and Google engineer Anthony Lewandowski formed the first church to follow an artificial intelligent being. I think I'm going to broker a merger. I think that the Church of the Jedi should merge with the Church of the AI. Call it the Jedi. And they can make a robot Jedi priest. All right, that's weird news. So I'm going to give you one last one. I'm going to kind of lighten it up a little bit. Can I do that? It has nothing to do with prophecy. Here you go. Man accidentally runs over wife twice. Once I can understand. This is a true story. You got to listen to it. A 75-year-old German was so shocked he had accidentally run down his wife, he started forward and drove over her again, authorities said Wednesday. Police in western town of Bad Neuhuman, I guess it's called bad for a reason, said the man compounded his 73-year-old wife's misery after an onlooker told him he had just run over her while backing out of a parking space. So he immediately put it in forward and ran back over her. The woman was rushed to a hospital, and I have good news, she survived. So that's in the news for tonight. I'm going to ask the ushers if they come forward.